Almost without exception, they are generous with their time, their advice, and their opinions. The problem comes when you ask two of these experts the same question. When is the correct time to pick olives? How can I keep scorpions out of the house? Is the Provençal climate changing for the warmer? Is pastis the cure for all ills? Invariably, you will receive totally conflicting answers, each delivered with enormous conviction. And I admit that I always choose to believe the most improbable one. Among these experts, one in particular deserves to be mentioned here, even though he also appears several times in the entries that follow. He is the Emeritus Professor, Monsieur Farigoul. Now retired from the mainstream of academic life, he has established a charitable course for the education of backward foreigners, and I am his favourite pupil. In fact, I think I may be his only pupil. Lessons are held in the local café, and the curriculum is remarkably wide-ranging, since Monsieur Farigoul seems to be an expert on everything. Among other things, I have tried him on hornets' nests, Napoleon's love life, the use of donkey dung as fertilizer, the poetry of Frédéric Mistral, the essential character differences between the French and the Anglo-Saxons, and on the Avignon papacy. He has never been short of an answer, usually contentious, always extremely opinionated. It is to this unconventional muse that I owe a considerable debt, which I now acknowledge with great pleasure. Some unreliable geography. It seems to me that almost everyone, from the first Roman map-maker onward, has had very definite ideas of exactly where Provence is. But unfortunately for the seeker after geographical truth and precision, these ideas have varied, sometimes by hundreds of kilometres. I was told, for instance, that Provence commence à Valence. Provence starts in Valence, way up north in the Rhône-Alpes département. Recently, I made the mistake of passing this information on to my personal sage, Monsieur Farigoul, who told me that I was talking nonsense. One might stretch a point, he said, and include Nyons in Provence as a reward for its glorious olives, but not 1 centimetre further north. He was equally adamant about the eastern boundary, Nîmes, and the western limit, Sisteron. The fact is that over the centuries, boundaries have expanded and contracted. A bulge here, a dent there, sprawling or shrinking. Names have changed too, or have disappeared from popular use. Not long ago, the lowly Basse-Alpes were given a leg up in the world and promoted to the Alpes d'Haute-Provence. And who nowadays could tell you with any conviction where the Comtat Venessin begins and ends? It is not an exaggeration to say that the whole area, for many years, was an affront to the French sense of neatness, order, and logic. Clearly, this haphazard, almost medieval state of affairs couldn't be allowed to continue in the modern world. Something had to be done, and so eventually, throwing up their hands in frustration, the officials in charge of such matters decided to consolidate several départements of southeastern France into one new, all-embracing region. Naturally, this needed a name, and who better to provide one than that shadowy but influential figure, the minister in charge of acronyms. We can thank him for such triumphs as CICAS, CREFAK, CEPABA, CRICA, and these come from just a brief glance at the Vaucluse telephone directory. There are literally thousands of others. The minister of acronyms was called in. He rummaged through the alphabet and deliberated, and having deliberated, he brought forth. PACA was born, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, stretching from Arles in the west to the Italian frontier in the east, a single, tidy, administratively correct geographical unit. What a relief. At last we all knew where we were. Or did we? Today, people spending their vacations in Saint-Tropez, in Nice, even in distant Menton, still send postcards home with enthusiastic descriptions of the wonderful time they're having in Provence. Foreign journalists have only to catch a glimpse of lavender in the hills above Cannes to write about the glories of the Provençal countryside. A fish supper in Antibes is promoted as a true Provençal bouillabaisse. And in the lexicon of real estate agents, those incurably creative souls, any stone-built villa with a tiled roof albeit within spitting distance of Monte Carlo, is automatically classified as a Provençal mât. In other words, Provence and Provençal are finding themselves in areas where, strictly speaking, they have no business being. So where is Provence, and what are its boundaries? Maps vary, opinions differ, confusion reigns, but in the end, I find myself agreeing with Monsieur Farigoul's geography. Provence, for our purposes at least, consists of 3 départements, Bouches-du-Rhône, Alpes-de-Haute-Provence, and the Vaucluse. It is, of course, possible that many will denounce this as a purely arbitrary decision. It is even possible that some of the following entries might overstep these arbitrary boundaries by a hair's breadth. Forgive me. All I can offer by way of apology and excuse is, in the Provençal manner, a shrug. And now, Provence A to Z. Accent. There is a popular misconception that the language spoken in Provence is French. It resembles French, certainly. Indeed, in its written form it is almost identical. But remove it from the page and apply it to the ear, and Provençal French might easily be another language. If words were edible, Provençal speech would be a rich, thick, pungent verbal stew, simmered in an accent filled with twanging consonants, a civet, perhaps, or maybe a daube. Before coming to live in Provence, I acquired a set of Berlitz tapes in order to improve my grasp of French, which I hadn't studied since my school days. Evening after evening, I would sit and listen to cassettes of the most mellifluous, perfectly enunciated phrases, spoken, I believe, by a lady from Tours. I was told that the accent of Tours is considered a jewel among accents, the most polished and refined in France. Every morning in front of the mirror while shaving, I would do my best to imitate this accent, pursing my Anglo-Saxon lips until they could pronounce something close to the Gallic U, practicing the growl from the back of the throat that is so necessary for the rolling Gallic ah. Little by little, I thought, I was making progress. And then I left England to come south. It was an instant farewell to the lady from Tours, because the sound of the words I encountered in Provence was unlike anything I had heard before. And to make matters even more incomprehensible, these words were delivered with an incredible velocity, a vocabulary gone berserk. My ears were in shock for months, and for at least a year I was unable to conduct any kind of sustained conversation without a dictionary. This I used much as a blind man uses a white stick, to identify obstacles and try to find my way around them. To this day, many years later, there are times when words, even sentences, pass me by in a glutinous blur of sound. Living as I do in the country, I have noticed that the rural accent is perhaps a little thicker, or some might say purer, than in bastions of urban civilization like Avignon or Aix. But then there is Marseille, a special case. Here, the unsuspecting visitor will have to contend not only with the accent, but with an entire sub-language. How, I wonder, would the lady from Tours react if she were offered a pastaga, which is a pastis, directed to the nearest pissadou, or toilet, cautioned against employing a massaquin, a bad worker, accused of being raspi, miserly, invited to a balletti, a small dance, or admired for her croille, which is her arrogance. Like me, I suspect she would find it all extremely puzzling, even comique, or extraordinary. I. It has been said that Provence is a region that has been rubbed with garlic. Whether you think of garlic as le divin bulbe, or the stinking rose, or the poor man's panacea, there's no getting away from it. In soups, in sauces, in salads, with fish, with meat, with pasta, with vegetables, on or in bread. And if there isn't quite enough of it for your taste, you can always resort to this old Provençal habit. Take a clove of garlic, probably the one you always carry in your pocket for just such a gastronomic emergency. Peel it, and hold it between the thumb and index finger of your right hand. With your left hand, hold a fork with its tines facing downward on a plate. Grate the garlic briskly across the tines until you have enough aromatic juice and fragments on your plate to season the food to your liking.